Mad Catholic is created by ordinary people with deep faith and lots of questions, so we all can unbox our faith. Now, here's your host, Kelly Worth, and today's special guest, Bishop Mary Unger.
When you hear the word church, what image comes to mind? When I was very young, a preschool Sunday school teacher took my hands, folded them like this, and taught me to say, "Here's the church, here's the steeple, open the door, and see all the people." Maybe you learned that too. When I hear the word church, I usually picture a building, Gothic or Romanesque or modern, perhaps with art and beautiful windows. I joke with people that the first attraction to Catholicism in this cradle Lutheran was architectural and artistic. They struck me like lightning in high school French class as I watched a film on Chartres Cathedral. Flying buttresses, rows, stained glass windows, spires, and most of all, lofty spaces. I felt the heavens open. I went on to study liturgical arts and design in college, long before I came into communion with the Catholic Church. Yes, I adore a fine church building and the worship that can happen there. Of course, as we grow in faith, we learn that church is more than buildings and adornments. The church is the body of Christ, the tradition, the word, the Trinity, the sacraments, the teachings, the works of mercy, the mission, and maybe most of all, the love of God that finds, surprises, and binds us. COVID changed our thinking about church when we found our beloved buildings weren't as accessible or didn't feel as safe as before. That's not the only thing that did it for me, though. As an independent Catholic, I've had to release the luxury of feeling at home in the usual gorgeous Catholic spaces where I was once welcomed. As a woman called outside the margins to the diaconate and priesthood, I'm reimagining what church might look like for me for the rest of my life. Where and how will I serve? Where will I offer communion services or masses? Will I ever experience the luxury of a chapel or church for worship? Our guest today has reimagined church, too, as a Catholic priest and bishop. She has answered a call to finding church and her surprising aha moments of God, as she puts it, in the trenches. She could have stayed comfortably inside parish walls where she served a community. In truth, her parishioners couldn't understand why she would leave as she was so happy there. But as the first woman priest in her jurisdiction, she heard a different, surprising call from God. Funny how God so often calls servants and prophets to give up their beautiful, comfortable spaces. Bishop Mary Unger is a cradle Catholic and went to Catholic school for 12 years. She studied nursing at the Jackson School of Nursing in Miami, Florida. She has certifications in case management and has worked as a critical care nurse. She was also an administrative hospital supervisor for approximately 15 years in a 188-bed facility. She worked in quality assurance, utilization review, and case management for the last 14 of those years, with 3 in an emergency department. A turn of events I'll let her tell you about brought her face to face with a pastoral vocation. Bishop Mary Unger and others in her independent Catholic clergy community now make a difference by devoting themselves to intimate ministries in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and private homes. They've turned from ministries anchored in buildings to community-wide ministries for and with the elderly, prisoners, and those battling chemical dependency. As she wrote to me, Living Spirit Catholic Community is not a church. It is a community of clergy with unique gifts in various parts of the state and beyond, who wish to share their gifts in traditional and non-traditional church settings. We each bring unique things to the table of service. It's remarkable and magnificently alive. Bishop Mary will also share with us the significant aha moments of her life and how God intimately surprises us. I'm honored to host this devoted, heartfelt, independent, and creative Catholic leader and servant of God. Bishop Mary, Welcome to Mad Catholic.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And
Joy.
that's quite a welcome.
Ah,
Wow.
well, aha.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I'm so glad you could come because as I read your information, I was struck by a lot of parallels in our lives, our earlier commitments to healthcare, our meandering path of faith. But I'd love to hear more about your beginnings. You are Cradle Catholic.
Yes, I had two very devoted Roman Catholic parents, and they were very faith-filled. As a child, I was ill, and I could not do a lot of physical things because of my illness.
Mm,
So I went to church a lot. My mother went to
mhm.
daily mass. We went to novenas and everything that the church offered, we were there for. So I was dragged along to all those places so she could keep an eye on me and make sure I didn't do anything I wasn't supposed to. But as the years went by, I ended up marrying a divorced non
Mm,
Catholic who was
mhm.
referred to as that man until he got his annulment. And then he was welcomed into the family. He became very close to my parents and he to them. My parents lived in the town next to us here in Florida. And one night I got a call from my father and he said, I need you to come and take your mother to the hospital. There's something very odd going on. And I'm not sure what it is, but I know that if you're there with her, they'll get it figured out. So I brought her to the emergency room, but before I got her into the car, and this was like at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she lived in an over 55 community. There was nobody out. There was just street
Mm,
lights. Night. It was a June night in Florida, which
mhm.
if people have lived there, you know how humid it can be 24/7. And a voice said to me, have her take a good look around because this will be the last time she sees this place. And I was freaked out. I was 33 years old. I mean, what is this? And I hadn't been drinking, I had been sleeping. I looked around and there was no one.
Mm,
And she got into the car and had no comprehension of what I had heard because I thought she'd figure it out, and she didn't.
mm,
I was too petrified to say anything. But when I got to the hospital, I knew exactly what to do with the doctors. I made sure that she was a do not resuscitate because that was her wishes.
mhm.
And they told me because of the hour of the night, they would support that decision, but they didn't feel it was going to be an issue. And when my dad came in the morning, then they would have to get the official paperwork done. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Then that next morning, I called my siblings. I said to them, I don't know how to tell you this, but I got a voice last night. And so they came. 2 days later, she was gone. And the doctors were very surprised. But the interesting thing was, my mother was a very faith filled woman. And the first night after 24 hours, the doctor had said to me, she's had a heart attack and she's in congestive heart failure. And he said to me, she's a little anxious. I think it might benefit her if you came in to see her tonight. And it was late. It was after visiting hours. But of course, I was a supervisor. Didn't matter. I could go in anytime. And I went up and sat with her. And she said, it's dark outside. So it's got to be late. Why are you here? And this is a woman that I loved and she loved me. And she was always very warm and cordial, unless she had done something really bad. But she knew something was up.
Mhm.
So I pulled up a chair and I just said in my head, please, God, tell me to say something appropriate that's going to make it work for her without being painful and scary for both of us. I said to her, your doctor is a very smart man, but you're not responding to his therapies the way he had hoped. And she calmed right down and she said, okay. So she gave me a list of everything she wanted done, a brother in law she wanted to help, wanted to find Jesus, and all these things. But she got all those things off her heart, which was so beautiful. And God allowed me to be the catalyst to make that
Mm,
happen. Oh, I'm getting chills telling you that. So that was wonderful.
mhm.
But then I went back to my husband and kids, and 13 weeks later, which was my dad's favorite number, and he had asked my mom not to make him wait too long, he died. So I was happy the two of them were no longer missing one another. My dad's idea was that all the people that die in the world on that particular day are in a line to go up and see Jesus. And when you get your place in line up at the front, if you've been very good, you get an extra wish. And he was convinced that if she asked for my dad to come, he'd be coming. And so 13 weeks to the day. Now I
Oh.
got no voice about him. I
Mm,
saw him at 2:45 and I went off to work at the hospital. And at 5:45, I got a call.
mm,
I needed to go to their house right away because he was dying and dead. He had an
mm,
aneurysm and they knew that was coming. We just didn't know when.
mhm,
So no more voices happened. Everything was status quo. Kids grew up, and my husband got sick with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. He was ill for 9 years, and I retired early to take care of him after he was on hospice for 6 months. And he lived another 18 after that. So we had gone to Saturday night mass for years. He became a Catholic during his illness, and the priest came to the house a couple of times. We had a wonderful Eucharistic minister, but the priest, when he came, seemed nervous around my husband. Alzheimer's can make you a little uncomfortable because if you don't know
mhm,
what to say to a
mhm.
person, you can agitate them, and who knows, maybe he'd had that experience before. But the Eucharistic minister was absolutely phenomenal. So we got through all that. After Ed died, I was going to hospice support groups and I was going to a private psychologist to work through my grief
Mm.
so that I wouldn't continue to be sad all the time. I didn't want to bring my kids down either because it's contagious in my mind anyway. And I needed to work on that. I tried to go back to Mass. We had been watching it on television because physically he wasn't able to go out. And I went on Saturday, which is when I used to go in the afternoon, and I just sat there and cried and cried. And I didn't encourage anyone around me to hear Mass because I was too busy boohooing. So then I thought I'll try to go on Sunday mornings. Well, anybody that is grieving or has grieved understands that sleep is always very erratic. So I'd wake up at 2 in the morning, be awake till 6 in the morning, fall back to sleep, and wake up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That was frustrating to me. I missed Mass. And then there would just happened to be an article in the local paper. They would do a little one-page story on spiritual awareness or something about different churches. They had one about a motorcycle drive-in restaurant. You could have service at a restaurant with a motorcycle. And there was a Jewish synagogue that had a female rabbi that didn't
Mhm.
require tithing. That was another story. And then there was this story about this old Catholic church. And it said that they were very welcoming to everybody. And I thought, aren't we? Aren't Roman Catholics welcoming to everybody? I just assumed everybody, you know. But I was in a little white picket fence. I had no idea. The only issue I knew was divorce issues with estrangement from the sacraments, but I didn't really understand anything else. And so I decided, oh my gosh, the mass is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm going to go. So I did. And that day, there were about 15 people there. So it wasn't like loaded, but everything seemed very familiar. Roman Mass, Roman Missal. And I'm coming out of church, and the bishop who said the Mass was saying hello to everybody as they left. And he said, "You're new here." And I felt like saying, "No kidding, Dick Tracy. There's 15 people." Yeah. So I said, "Yes." And he said, "How did you hear about us?" So I told him about the article in the newspaper. And he said, "Let me tell you a little bit about the church." He proceeds to tell me pretty much what's in the article. But it was so nice that he did that. And then, "Oh, I want to tell you something else." I said, "What's that?" He said, "We accept women as priests in this church, but we're still looking for our first one." Now, meanwhile, it had only been 5 months since Ed died. I was still doing all those counseling things, and I really wasn't socializing with people because I was anxious still because of, I guess, just the pain of
Oh, yeah.
the death. Because, I love that guy. I said to him, "Well, you never know. I just might be your first woman priest someday." And I had no intention of saying that, but I ran to my car because I just needed to get away, you know. I came back the next week to church, and Ed's grave had not been blessed. So I said to him, "Do you ever do that?" And he said, "Oh, sure." Well, he was in a gravesite an hour away. And it turns out that we chatted the whole way down and back and through a meal, which I thought was so fantastic that a priest would be willing to give me this much time.
Yeah.
He was doing an interview. I had no idea. I was clueless in those things. So, right after that, I had a voice in the middle of the day. I was thinking, what am I going to do now? I can't go back to nursing. Everybody I look at either has Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, and it makes me cry. What am I going to do, Lord? What am I going to do? So I thought, I'm going to write a book. There have been so many blessings that happened to Ed during his illness that I started to be aware of. Just being his caregiver and not racing off to work and racing off to do this or that and just focusing on him. And I saw God touching us every single day in either the people that came to us or the people that we had to interact with or just in each other. So I thought, I'm going to write a book about that. And then I had this voice follow me, and I thought, well, I'm not doing anything for a year. I'm still seeing the psychologist. I'm still doing the hospice stuff. I got to have time.
Did it?
Follow me was the first voice.
Okay.
And that's the one I blew off. Then at a year, when I wasn't expecting it, and again, it was during the daytime, there was no glass of wine involved or anything like that. The voice came back and it said, "Follow me. I've been waiting for you for 37 years."
That's very specific.
I stopped. It was not something that anybody else would hear if somebody was here. The dog didn't bark on she's pretty
Yeah.
attentive to noise.
Right.
So I started thinking, 37 years, what the heck is that? I was married to Ed for 35 and we dated for 2. So there's your 37. And when I first started dating him, I remember saying to him, this relationship may never go anywhere because I'm considering becoming a missionary. Now, I was already a nurse at that point, but I fell madly in love with him, totally forgot that. And the interesting thing is that there was nobody that knew that
Mm.
except my husband and parents, and they were all deceased. My kids never knew because there was no need for them to know. I loved their father,
Right.
and I was very happily married. And so to have that come, I knew it was beyond
Mhm.
me and beyond this world, and it made me stand up and take notice. So I went to the bishop the following week. I told him what happened. I said, "What do you think about that?" And he said, "You've had a vocation call." And I felt like saying, "No, but yeah, that's right. I agree with you. Agree
Right.
with you." I said, "But what do I do?" And he said, "Well, that's up to you, Mary. What do you want to do about it?" And I said, "Well, I'm afraid not to do something. This is,"
Yeah.
and he said, "Yes, it is." I said, "I definitely want to do something with it." He said, "Well, we require background checks of everyone." I said, "Go ahead. That's fine. I'm a nurse, and no problem." He said, "Can we ask the people to pray for you?" And I said, "Sure." Now, he was also an abbot, and we had nuns out in Utah. So, to be honest with you, following a vocation call, I thought maybe I was going to become a nun. I had no idea that it was going to lead to anything else. I just didn't want to move to Utah. That's the thing I didn't want to do because it's cold there and I'm cold. I'm already cold. I don't need to be in a place that has cold. I'd never go out. So, anyway, I went out with him as he spoke to the people and he said, "Can I have your attention for a minute? Mary's had a vocation call." It was very sweet. And then he said, "I'd like you to pray for her. I'm going to be sending her an application, but she is making application to be our first woman priest." And that's how I found out I was going to be a priest. I had no idea. No idea. Then it gets better because I started an online school, which was fine. It wasn't an issue. It was just different than having a teacher right in
Mhm.
front of you.
Mhm.
But then something interesting happened. This priest came from Virginia out of the blue, and he wanted to work in a local parish for about a year, and then he was going to have a parish farther south in Florida. So he went to the bishop and said, "What would you like me to do? I want to get involved in something here." And he said to him, "Why don't you take Mary on as a student?" Now, I had no idea who this guy was
Yeah.
or anything about his history. He happened to be a professor for the Ascension Alliance Online School Seminary, had been for many years. The point is, I get the call, I get the location, I get the teacher. Oh, and might I say that no cost. I didn't have to pay any fees for any online education because I had started to,
Mhm.
but that all went away. He did additional masses in assisted livings, and once I became ordained a deacon, and even before that, I would accompany him. He was also a volunteer chaplain for hospice, so we went to a lot of nursing homes and facilities and to anoint people. So I got to see that in action a lot. And this just fed my soul. It just fed my soul. And I loved it. So then I got ordained a deacon 2 years after I started seminary, and I have to say the seminary process was full time. I couldn't get enough of it. I kept thinking, how can you say that you're a Catholic Christian and spend less time on it than you do in your math classes or my nursing classes?
Yeah.
I was so uh, behind. The more I learned about God, the more I learned about Jesus, the more I learned about his ministry, the more I clamored to learn more. I had mixed family feelings. At that point, I just had siblings. We were all raised Roman Catholic, and one person said to me, "I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. Maybe if you had been in a different parish, it would have been okay." So she thought
Mhm.
that it was related to the parish I was in. I had absolutely no problem with my parish.
Yeah.
It was strictly because the mass times interfere with my sleep time, and I didn't want to take pills and potions to go to sleep
Yeah.
or to wake up. I wanted to just avoid all that.
Yeah.
It was God's hand in everything. As I look at that, I see so many more moments.
Mhm.
What is he trying to tell me now? I have a sister who gets messages from the archangels. Now, my siblings, and I have to say myself too, when this happened, and this was way before my vocation, we thought she was. So they came to me and said, "You're the medical person. Talk to her and see what you think." And I said, "Well, I know she's not medical. So if she gets a message and it's medical, I'll know something more." And she got the most incredible thing about something that was going on with one of my brothers.
Yeah.
There was no way she could have known that. The
Ah,
doctors hadn't even figured it out yet. So she shares things with me, but part of what she shares is God is all about love. And that was
yeah.
so apparent. I was in so much pain and I yelled at God. Failed to mention that. I yelled at God before that voice came the first time. "What do you want me to do now? You know I can't go back to nursing. The kids are all settled in their places. What do you want me to do?" And that's when the voice came. And of course, what do? I say, "Well, I'm not doing that for a year." And he must have been like, you know. And I think about that sometimes in how we talk to God. We tell him we want things,
Mhm.
and then we put up all these roadblocks to prevent it. Okay, so we moved on. I'm with this parish. They see me become a deacon, and I had 100 people show up. It was wonderful. We had a big reception like
Oh.
I was getting married, except I was the only one, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then I became a priest. And again, we had about 100 people. There were a lot of Roman
Mhm.
friends of mine who came. But once I became a priest, I don't know if they went there for curiosity, but a lot of them, you know, and that's okay. Because the thing is, I tell people God is like ice cream. There's a lot of different flavors. Find one you like,
Mhm.
have a relationship with it, and thrive with it. And if we find that flavor, maybe you like vanilla, but maybe what you really are getting is chocolate chip, and you need to get rid of those chips and just have what you really want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Independent Catholicism doesn't have all the bells and whistles. We don't have the women's clubs, and we don't have daily mass necessarily, and we don't have novenas all the time, and we don't have a lot of things that a lot of people need for their support systems. And that's okay. You need to do what works for you. I know for me that, as I said, I didn't plan on becoming a priest, but I'm so grateful I am. I like to share the story of this lady was so cute and asked me to go and anoint her husband. She said he's been anointed 5 times before. Now, he was in a nursing home and he had just come back from another recent stay in the hospital, and this time they were gonna do hospice care for him. He wasn't gonna go back. And so I went to see him, and he clearly was in the last
Mhm,
24 hours, say, or 48 hours of life. So I decided to give him viaticum, which is a little different than the sacrament of the sick, as you know.
mhm,
So Eucharist at that point, he wasn't able to swallow. So I put the consecrated host to his
mhm,
lips,
mhm.
and then I gave it to her.
Mm.
And so afterwards, she said to me, "You know, he's been anointed 5 times and you've done it the best. You've done it the best." Now, meanwhile, I'm a brand new priest,
Yeah,
but it was
yeah,
such a beautiful experience for me. I said to her, "You've probably had priests who know all these prayers by heart. I'm still learning those. But this particular blessing is so unique because we know he's very close to joining God, spirit to spirit. Those prayers are wonderful that you've received, but there's a special one that they have preserved just for now." And that's what he got. That was our common connector for years after that. She just
mhm,
loved it. If you can touch a person in such a way that it makes a difference in their life, it's magnificent. I had a lady that used to be at my old parish who had back surgery and she had grandchildren that she wanted to see receive their sacraments. She couldn't sit in a church and watch it. And I said, "I'm willing to do it for you, but these children have to get educated." She says, "I will do that." So I gave her the materials. She did it, and I did 3 masses. I did a mass that focused on the Eucharist. I did a
mhm.
mass focused on the Holy Spirit, and then we had the sacramental mass. And they received the sacraments in the grandmother's house. We had stoles for them, and we let them pick out the music. The grandmothers were there. The kids had gone through a divorce situation, and one of the parents was
Yeah,
not supportive, so the grandmothers were taking hold of the
yeah.
children's faith, and it was a beautiful experience. I continued to do masses there once a month for 4 months or so afterwards, and she said to me, "I never realized a home mass could be so intimate." And intimacy is what we're striving for, Kelly,
Mm,
intimacy. I felt that was a lack in what my husband had received, but yet that seems to be the
mhm.
focus of where I wanna be with the people. So, if I go to an assisted living, I like the small ones. I went to a nursing home for 2 years, and it depended on the activity director as to whether you got time or not. I remember
Mhm.
one Father's Day mass, I said, "Can you tell me something special about your dad?" And the woman at the facility said, "No, I hated him, don't
Ah,
like him." And I said, "Was there anyone else in your life that was a male or a parental father figure for you if it wasn't your real dad?" So she remembered an uncle that had been kind, and we prayed for him.
yeah,
But just, little things, finger rosaries, and then saying a decade with them because they might lose it in the bed linens, but if it's on their finger, maybe not,
yeah.
you know? It's not anything magical. It's just taking a moment to think about being in that bed and having been sick myself for 7
Mhm,
years. I had kidney issues
mhm,
resulting in a kidney being removed, but I know what it's like to be on
mhm.
that side of the bed and be so dependent on everyone else meeting your needs or not. And sometimes the task is taken care of,
Mhm.
but the compassionate love isn't. And that's what Jesus did. He didn't use fancy words. He didn't try to impress anybody with anything. He took people's hands. He looked into
Mhm.
their eyes. He thanked God for the blessing of being here and touching this person and being able to show love to that person. I just love being that vessel of love.
That's amazing. What strikes me so deeply about what you're saying is that this is, in so many ways, a new model of priesthood that doesn't just preside, but that really encounters and accompanies in a personal way that is so beautiful for many Christians. We're so accustomed to you go to church, you do the service, you say the prayers, you go home, and you may even be friends with the pastor, and that's nice. But this is truly an encounter with
Mm.
God that you're facilitating that matters to that person, that clicks into their experience, their perspective. And I find that so beautiful.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank
Yeah.
you. The thing is that uh, being in that first church that I was in as a priest, I got very connected to the people, and they had wonderful services, and even though we did 1 mass, it was very fun, and in that period of time, one of my brothers
Wow.
passed away and his wife passed away. I got to do their funeral masses, which
Wow.
was pretty amazing,
Yeah.
and we had full houses in those 2 masses, and so people that came saw a woman priest that they didn't really see
Right.
before.
Yeah.
But my bishop at the time was very gracious, letting me have the floor, so to speak.
Yeah.
But after, I guess it was a total of about 7 years I was involved with that church, I was getting restless,
Mm.
and it was unfortunately mistaken to be some type of desire for more power because I was a parish priest, and so I was made an assistant pastor. Guess what? That wasn't really what I was looking for. And I tried to explain it, but it just wasn't being understood, and I guess maybe I didn't portray it correctly, or maybe they didn't wanna understand it, I don't know, and it matters not. The point was, I felt like I needed a change. During seminary, we had, like, 14 different clergy, and part of my seminary assignment was to visit with all the different
Mhm.
clergy one-on-one and kind of glean their gifts.
Mhm.
Each one of us have different ones. Even just listening to your different podcasts and the differences in the people that you've interviewed thus far all have different gifts, all very dynamic in their own ways, but different.
Mhm.
And it's the same God who gives all of these different gifts. So I felt the need to get off the altar up above here and get down into the trenches of
Yeah.
the home mass.
Mhm.
And there was an elderly couple that had not been able to go to church. He had dementia. They couldn't get out. So I did masses for them on the porch around a table. The man cried
Mm.
and the woman couldn't stop smiling. I got to anoint him after the mass, and it was a very beautiful, warm experience. I had their favorite hymns playing. Sometimes God can feel so far away. And I have to say, growing up, I used to think if we're good, God just stays up there on the cloud and everything is golden. And if you're bad, then it can be lightning bolts for you. And I really had no idea that God was so intimate, that he was so personal, that he was so close, and that he was so patient.
That's
I mean,
what
I
I was thinking.
I get annoyed about 5 minutes sometimes. I get annoyed sitting at a light for
Right,
2 or 3
right.
turns, and you wonder what's the matter. Gosh, what a patient God.
And not just patient in a putting up with you sort of way, but the fact that he gave you that marriage and family and blessed it so richly. And then you being a nurse, nurturing all of your gifts, that then God could take all of that. And then when you were ready to say yes to the vocation, all that you did and had experienced is what vitalizes this intimate connection.
Absolutely.
And that's the beautiful thing. I think people are like, "Oh, I messed up. I didn't say yes back then." No, nothing is ever wasted in the divine economy. God
That's the right way to say it.
brings it all to fruition as we become ready to say yes. And I see that in what you're talking about.
Oh, it's so true, Kelly, it's so true. And I wasn't ready to do the trenches until I
Right.
understood the mountaintop piece.
And the long suffering that you went through with your husband.
Mm.
I personally believe that suffering, while I don't believe God gives it to us, I believe that if we allow God to accompany us in it, it can give us some of our most durable conversions and lessons.
Oh, absolutely.
And what you suffered with him, you know what it's like to sit at home with a person suffering from physical and mental manifestations of illness and not be able to get to mass, and to wonder, where is the pastoral care? And here you are. So if you hadn't experienced that, it would be different.
You're right. You're right.
So,
And he really is listening to us all the
yeah,
time. He's
yeah,
so close. He's so close. And I have to say that going into a person's home or going into a facility
mhm,
by yourself can be a little anxiety producing,
mhm,
but the reality is it's really okay.
mhm,
Again, God led the way.
mhm.
So He had me go to a nursing home, one that Bishop had set up, but there was another one where a friend of mine just happened to be the registration person, and she said, "Mary, I don't see any priests coming here to say mass. Do you wanna come?" That's how that started, and it was so wonderful. And now I have a next door neighbor who has just gone to assisted living about a month ago. So this
Mm.
week I'm going Friday to see them to get set up in their facility to start doing masses. He's in a small place. I have neighbors, I've done masses for them. One neighbor said to me when they saw me walking around with my dog and I was in my clerics going to or from church, "What do we call you? Father?" And I said, "That's what I wanted to be called, but they wouldn't let me. So it's mother." And then when I became a bishop, oh my gosh, the neighborhood. I said, "I'm still me. A bishop's
Mm.
really a priest on steroids." The main thing is becoming a priest,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
main thing.
Yeah.
But now I've had the opportunity to consecrate Bishop Fidel. He's growing a church up in northern
Mhm.
Florida.
Mhm.
We consecrated Deacon Dan 2 weeks ago. This is a guy on with cancer who's on chemo and he wants to serve.
You grasp that power of intimacy when you look at the way Jesus walked through this world person by person. And yes, he addressed crowds and he left us wonderful teachings to inspire us. But I think it was to inspire us to those intimate encounters where we truly bring Christ into the dynamic. And I know that's what excites me about the different aspects of my developing. I'm to be ordained in the diaconate
229th,
soon.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I know,
yeah,
it's exciting, and God is dealing with me in all sorts of beautiful ways, but always about that focus on
absolutely,
the
absolutely.
presence, the real presence, the full presence of Christ, and even here, and this is one of the things that I just love about this podcast is that I get to bear witness and engage with people who are on fire with their encounters with Christ. It's just mind blowing.
Is. But think about how excited he is at the other side that someone's saying, "I'm listening to you, Lord. Keep talking."
Ex
So when I left the church, I failed to mention that I needed to find a new bishop. So I went to this guy that I knew because, as I said, I had gotten exposed to a lot of different clergy. I asked him if he would be willing to be my bishop. He said, "Well, did you do this, 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 this?" And I said, "No, I did this and this." And he said, "Go do that other thing. And if you still need to come, then I'll welcome you." So I did what he said, and I went to see him because it didn't work out the way we had hoped. I ended up seeing the new bishop, and I said, "So this is the story." He says, "Okay, I want to make you a bishop right away." And I was like, "I didn't come to you to become a bishop.
Yeah,
That isn't my intent. I just need a new home
yeah.
that will allow me to be the priest that I feel called to be in this time." So we talked about that a little bit, and he was already doing the 12-step AA programs where the person wants to talk to someone
Mhm,
regarding spiritual matters.
mhm,
He was the person for that in the local
mhm,
facilities they had down there of AA. And that was his ministry in addition to doing
mhm.
assisted livings, and he was quite happy with that. He's the one that began the Living Spirit Catholic Community name, and he said, "It's not gonna be a church, Mary.
Yeah.
You can be what
Mhm,
you wanna. You don't have to do a church piece. We can be the church without walls," as you mentioned when we first came in, just doing what talks to your heart. So then I said to him, "What do you think about adding Fidel?" Because he was a priest needing, a bishop as well. We had gone to seminary, he was a year behind me. He was teaching at the prison, so we became Living Spirit Catholic Community, each in our own locations. The only time we'd actually say mass together was online, or we would come together at my house. I have a chapel here in the house for my own personal use, and it works for me. I'll invite 1 or 2 friends, that's it,
mhm,
you know. So that's how the church started.
mhm,
And we have tried to have a weekly mass, at least online. And people wanted to know, where's your physical location? They
mhm,
seem to be stuck on that. We rented a church space and then that church got sold. So now we're renting a community center and they don't want it to be all churches. So we only get it once a month. But that's okay. We've added another priest to our group. She is a nurse that I used to work with. And she took private duty care of my brother. When I brought communion to him and I was in my clerics, she said, "You're Catholic?" I never knew they let women be priests. I've wanted to be a priest my whole life.
Wow. Wow.
And so shortly after, in the process of me leaving that church, she joined it.
Mhm.
I think the bishop was happy he had another
Mhm.
woman and another person, so he wasn't totally by himself. She's now with me and Fidel and Dan. We have a priest out in Utah who has very bad vision, in fact, legally blind. She's very prayerful. She's creating an educational class, putting books on Braille and having them read also for audiobooks for people who can't see,
Mm.
but who want to learn more about God and some of these concepts that you wouldn't necessarily be able to unless you had a book. So everybody's doing what gifts are theirs. I just love it. Here I am, 11 years from that first call where I responded, actually the second call, but it's still very alive. And the time has gone so quickly. In the meantime, the bishop that started the church has passed away, and I'm now the presiding bishop. My brother that's still living likes to call me the archbishop, and I said, I don't need that. And as long as whatever prefaces it, Ms. Mary, Mother Mary, Reverend Mary, Bishop Mary, as long as it's polite, I don't care. In fact, that was the cutest thing with the people from my first parish because they knew me as Mary, and then all of a sudden I had all these different names. And I said, just Mary's fine. But
Right.
I do think that Mother Mary is a hard name to accept
Ah.
because of the Blessed Mother. And I didn't like it.
Mm.
I love being a mother.
Yeah.
But that name, it's
Mm.
not like Mother Nancy or Mother Susan. It's the Blessed Mother's name. I'd
A
rather,
gift and a burden, perhaps.
yeah, that's a good way to say it. I think what I wanted was to have a voice in being able to
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
what I would be called. That's what we allow in our church community, a voice in what you are called.
That's good.
Because again, that's important.
You wrote to me before the podcast about the underlying purpose of all of this, the understanding that there are people who do not know the love of God and who are not being touched by the word and sacrament because of health, chemical dependency, or imprisonment, or any number of things. I know you mentioned having dealt with the Roman Church's ideas about divorce, how that created an obstacle for you and your beloved for a long time. There are just so many people who are not being reached. I don't slam the Roman Church on this program
No,
because I love the Roman Church. I want renewal. But whether it's intentional or not, there are people brokenhearted on the margins. And I love hearing about ministries like yours and so many people who are attuned to those voices on the margins, those lonely people who just want church in the sense that we talked about. So it's
well, the
really
other
wonderful.
I failed to mention the gay population. I was a nurse. I worked with many different people, and I didn't know if they were gay or not, and I didn't care if they were gay or not. We were all doing a job,
Mhm.
and that's the way I felt about the church too. But in this church that I went to, the bishop was very open about being gay, and somebody said to me, "You're going to a church where there's gay people?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh." And I said, "Guess what?" I said, "I've been there for 6 months and nobody's had sex on the altar." So I smashed them, and then, of course, they were like,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
it was kinda
I've had
funny.
my journey with that too, and there was a time when I came into union with the Roman Church where I embraced the party line on that. I had to learn and I had to grow, and I'm grateful that God gave me the opportunities to do that.
He does give us
Yeah.
opportunities. It's
Yeah.
a question of whether we are aware
Yeah.
that we have a choice, whether it's how we get out of bed in the morning, with a smile on our face, or with a,
Yeah. Yeah.
or if we are going to embrace the day and say, "Thank you for putting the light again, Lord. You put the sun out again for us."
So those aha moments, how do you in your spiritual practice predispose yourself, make yourself ready to embrace those moments when they come along?
I don't know when they're coming. So it's
Right,
hard
right.
to prepare for anything.
Yeah,
But I do try to get a good night's sleep,
yeah.
and every afternoon I like to have a nap, and I do enjoy that nap.
Interesting. Just a spiritual practice is a really interesting and rare idea. I like that.
But I go to bed thinking about all the things I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
I used to go to bed thinking about all the things I still had to do, and I'd have a little paper beside my bed and I'd write it down and I'd think, okay, I don't have to worry about that. And then I'd remember something else and I'd get up and write it down. Now I go to bed just thinking about, oh Lord, thank you so much. My feet worked today. My back didn't hurt. I remembered my eye drops. I don't have to get up again.
Yeah,
Little things.
yeah.
But it's amazing if you start being grateful,
Mm,
you start seeing opportunities for gratefulness everywhere.
mhm.
And little things can become ahas.
Yes.
Yesterday, I was thinking about the deacon that's a cancer
Mm,
survivor and on treatment, the impact of that
mhm,
in what he's doing. When I send him any information or I give him books or we talk, he is thirsty for all of this.
mhm.
He wants to make every single minute count.
Yeah,
And shouldn't we all?
very good. This has been wonderful. I am enjoying your insights. I can tell you're a woman of prayer. I guess that was behind the question I asked because I sense that prayer is definitely how you stay open. So that's wonderful.
My mother used to speak in tongues, and Reverend Nancy can do that. It's not my gift.
Yeah.
I get the
Yeah.
sledgehammer, follow me. It's different but wonderful.
Yeah.
I have to say that I really have to work at the non hit over the head moments
Yeah.
because sometimes I'll get a thought and I'll think, oh no, I can do it my way.
Yeah.
And then I think I should have done it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still learning, Kelly.
Yeah.
I am still learning. I just pray that God continues to have patience with me.
Oh.
If he waited 37 years, he might say, "The limit's 40. You've only got 3 left." There we
We
go.
don't know, and that used to bother me. Now it really enlivens me because I think, "Wow, this day this day really is important," because you
It
don't
is.
know how many you will have with the people around you. I feel that energy and that commitment in you, so thank you for
Oh, thank
sharing
you.
that.
Thank you.
Any last words you would like to share? You've said so
Uh,
many great things, that's not a requirement.
I don't know. I think looking at my kids and I see how loving they are
Yeah,
to their spouses and to their
yeah,
children and significant others and their animals
yeah,
and into their communities, how they serve people
yeah,
less fortunate than themselves. That's love too.
yeah,
Love doesn't have to be just in the church.
right.
And it doesn't have to be in a facility, and it doesn't have to be within someone's home. It can be on the sidewalks, and it can be in the doctor's office when you smile at someone,
Yeah.
or it can be at the grocery store when you let someone else in front of you in line that looks like
Mhm,
they're in a hurry and
mhm.
you're not that
Yeah,
particular day.
yeah.
That's how we begin.
Love in the
Yeah, and
trenches, love
love
that.
is the key to it all. So,
Thank you,
thank you
fantastic.
so much. This is
Well,
wonderful.
thank you. I knew
Wonderful.
we would have fun.
Yeah, I
I'm
was nervous.
I'm so glad to know you better, and thank you
You
for
as well.
bringing this joyful message to all of us at Mad Catholic, so
Thank you so much.